Can you create a creature from scratch in only 1 hour with 2 sculpting brushes and Blender 2.8? We will find out in this video. Hi everyone, my name is Zach, and in this video we want to take a look on how the Sculpt mode in Blender 2.8 looks like. Blender 2.8 is the next big release of Blender, which will change a lot how Blender works and stuff like this. And just right now there's a partially community funded project running, the Blender 2.8 Code Quest, where all the main developers are put into one place and they try to push Blender 2.8 as far as possible in 3 months. It's going from April to June 2018, so it's running right now. And if you like to check how the whole process is going, check code.blender.org. There you can see all the updates. And it's so cool to follow this along because so many things are changing on a daily basis basically. And just currently they changed the user interface quite a lot. And I just thought, let's take a look on how the Sculpt mode looks with the new interface. So Blender 2.8 is in early alpha, that means it's running extremely unstable. It might not run on every computer. It crashes a lot and many tools and functions are not working. So I don't recommend to use this for any serious projects. Just use it for experimental stuff. So before we start, at the end of the video there will be a small challenge for you and you can win a copy of my Mastering Sculpting workshop. So definitely stick to the end of this video. Yeah, and one final thing, if you are into sculpting, definitely download my free Blender Sculpting cheat sheet with all the shortcuts you need to know for Blender Sculpt mode. The download link is in the video description. So without further words, let's get started. So if you want to download the experimental build of Blender 2.8, go to blender.org, click on Download Blender, and then scroll down and here you find Go Experimental and click on Latest Experimental Builds. And here you can download the Blender 2.8 version. Keep in mind this is super unstable at this moment, but I think it will be much more stable in a few months from now. Okay, now let's take a look into Blender 2.8. So if you're working with Blender 2.8 and want to check out new features, just download the latest version every day because they are currently adding new stuff nearly every day. So this is how it looks like if you open up Blender 2.8. You can see quite a bit has changed, but if you know Blender, you will easily find most of the stuff. We will concentrate on the Sculpt mode here. So I will show you some things you can enable which make the sculpting experience much more fun. So first of all, you noticed that we have a new toolbar over here. And the cool thing is if you change the size here, you can basically disable the names and only have the icons. And here you will only see the stuff that is related to the mode or action you are doing right now. And they also did a small change here. If you click on something, then it not automatically is enabled like in the old Blender versions. You have to enable this, and now if I left click, this option will be enabled. Same thing if I enable rotation, left click, you can see I can rotate. And the same thing applies to other modes and stuff like this. So first of all, let's adjust the viewport so it looks awesome for sculpting. First of all, let's go to shading, and you can see here's now a single color enabled. I think it's similar like the solid viewport shading from old Blender, but I switch over to rendered. And now over here in the render settings, you can see that EEVEE is now enabled. So if you want to have a nice viewport with a lot of cool effects, we will take a look into this a little bit later in this video. But right now we switch over to clay because we have a new clay renderer here in Blender. And over here you have a few settings. So first of all, we can switch the matte caps we know from Blender 2.79 and before. But now we have a few more options, like we can rotate the matte cap, we can change the color or saturation, brightness. Then we have this cavity effect and the edges here. So this is helping a lot while sculpting to see better how the surface is shaping. And yeah, down here you can change this a bit. So now let's change this back to standard. You see this is a bit noisy. If you want to improve this, just increase the samples and then it will not be that noisy anymore. So, and the last thing we probably do when sculpting, we disable all the helping objects here in the background. And this we can simply do by clicking here on Overlay and disable Show Overlays. It's similar like this render only thing from the older Blender versions. So if I click on Overlay, disable this, and now you can see we only have our cube here. So the problem right now, modifiers are not supported. So I switch over to Edit mode. Let's enable the overlays. And now I hit W and click on Subdivide a few times. And then we have the Smooth tool. I enable this and then just left click a few times. And now we have this rounded cube, which we can use as basis for sculpting. Now let's head back to the object mode and let's disable the timeline down here. Disable the overlays. And then switch over to the Sculpt mode. And voila, this is how this looks like, and pretty cool. So first of all, let's shift space to go into full screen mode. And now we have all the important brushes listed over here. As you can see, you simply can enable them. And the brushes which have this little arrow down here, you can hold down left click and then you have this drop down menu to switch to another brush. So, and the cool thing is now all the options for the brushes you find up here. So for example, Dün Topo, click on this and then you have the options to change this. Still, all the important shortcuts are working, like with F, you can change the scale or the radius of the brush. With Shift F, you can control the strength, but you also can do it up here if you like. Then you can set the brush to add or to subtract. And you have all the options you usually have in the tool shelf over here. And yeah, if you like, you can make the tool shelf a bit smaller and then you only have the small icons here. With Control and middle mouse click, you can even scale this if you like, so you have even smaller icons. So now comes the clue. When you use Blender 2.8, save a lot, because in this current version I'm using here for this tutorial, most of the sculpting brushes are not working. The only brushes I could use was a standard Sculpt Draw brush, as you can see, and the smooth brush, which you can enable by holding down Shift. So let's enable Dün Topo, set it to constant detail and increase the resolution. What also does not work for me is to use the eyedropper to pick the resolution from the object, then Blender just crashes. But yeah, the rest still works fine. We can sculpt on here, and as you can see, it looks really beautiful. And yeah, for me it was a pretty good experience to sculpt here in Blender 2.8. Certainly accept the case that Blender always crashes when I use a different brush. So let's test it out. I use the blob brush here, and as soon as I click on it, it works. Oh, damn it. But yeah, I now use the other brush and you can see Blender just crashes. I restarted it and yeah, as mentioned, save a lot. And always when I restart Blender 2.8, I have to switch the shading down here back to material or render it if you use EEVEE. So I realized I can only use the Sculpt Draw brush and the Smooth brush. And I thought, well, only 2 brushes, create a decent sculpting in Blender, challenge accepted. I set me a goal, 1 hour, use these 2 brushes to sculpt a decent looking creature. And this is what I created in 1 hour. I will show you the time lapse of this thing in just a minute, but I want to show you how I achieved different kind of brushes with only the standard Sculpt Draw brush over here. So what we can use certainly is symmetry, so it will be sculpted on both sides. Then certainly dynamic topology, I use constant detail and start with a relatively low resolution. Then press N, and here I set the view length to 70. Usually it's set to 35, but it's not really recommended for sculpting because you have this strong perspective distortion. Increases, 75 is quite fine. And then we can start sculpting over here. And what I did was I adjusted the curve quite a lot. So with the curve, you basically can control the profile of your brush. And for example, if I use this standardish curve, we have this very roundish shape. And if I make this more pointy, like this, and then increase the resolution and hold down Control for subtract, you can see I can create these sharp lines, which are a little bit like using the crease brush, which I couldn't in this case. And if you just draw and add geometry, you can sharpen the edges, as you can see. And in this way, I was able to create all the creases over here. And for the T's and all the limbs and stuff like this, I couldn't use the snakehook brush. So I made a relatively smooth curve. By the way, all the presets down here also did not work for me here. And then I just increase the strength and just draw on one area. Not that high resolution. And in this way, I added this geometry, as you can see. It's not perfect, you have to get used to it, but it works. And as you can see, I was able to sculpt the whole creature out of one subdivided cube. Everything is sculpted out of one object. So even the eyes, the teeth, the tongue, and stuff like this. So we will now have a look at the time lapse on how I sculpted this creature. And after this, I show you how you can quickly paint this with the Vertex Paint mode, which basically just is coloring the vertices of this object. So you don't need a UV map or stuff like this. And after this, we will take a look on how I set up the material and the shading, lighting, and the scene setup for this creature here in EEVEE. So basically awesome real-time graphics. So now let's have fun with the sculpting. I needed about 57 minutes. Just one little note before we get started. My sculpting was inspired by this Dother sculpting created by Lisa, but I don't want to recreate this. I just wanted to have a very basic inspiration for the shape of my creature. So kudos to Under for this awesome design. Now let's get started. Alright, as shown before, I set up my scene, created this subdivided cube, and then I enabled dynamic topology with a very low resolution and started to shape the major details. And I really kept the resolution this low as long as I could because it was really hard to adjust the creature with only the one brush. So I don't want to destroy my details. So for the first round, I just wanted to make sure that the major details are looking right and the major proportions. And I have to say the biggest problem I had was that I always wanted to press the shortcuts that I'm used to. I know from the old Blender versions, but I really had to force me to not do it because if I did it and click on the creature, then Blender would crash. And that's also the reason why I saved a lot. So I really forced me to only use this brush, and it was also quite a pain to always change the curve because I couldn't use the presets. And I really had to decide, okay, now I use the crease kind of brush and use it all over the place, and then use a more smooth brush because it took a while always to adjust the curve of the creature. So as you can see, the creasing I just will do at the end when I'm done with all the major and also the smaller sculpting details. I think the creases are really the reason why this looks pretty okay at the end, because then we have a much higher resolution, or it seems so that it is higher resolution. And for the creases, I also increased the resolution of the dynamic topology quite a lot so that we have a higher resolution. Yeah, and then I just try to define the muzzle structures and yeah, just a little bit of details here and there. So I guess over the time I changed the resolution like 3 times or so. I started with 30, then I switched to 50 or 80, and the last resolution for some parts were about 120, I guess. Here you can see with adjusted curve I created the T's. I also tried to use the stroke and jitter option, but this doesn't work as well in this current Blender version I used here. So yeah, I had to stick to the crease brush kind of thing and the standard Sculptura brush. Here I add some veins, so it looks even stronger. And the last thing I did was to add a high resolution to the eye, because the eyes are the most important thing. You will look at this at first, so this has to be a little bit higher resolution than the other stuff. And yeah, after about 1 hour, I had this creature here. And now let's take a look how I did the coloring, because here I used the Vertex Paint mode. Since our sculpting here has a very high resolution, we can use the Vertex Paint mode to basically just color all the vertices here to add a very basic color to this creature. So we don't need to do retopology and texture painting and stuff like this, because I just wanted to show this creature pretty quick and don't want to waste a lot of time. So one thing at first you can see, we still have the flat shading. That means we can see all the triangles, and we want to use a smooth shading, but I couldn't find it here or in other options. So I just press space and search for shade smooth, click on that, and then you can see the smooth shading is enabled. And now let's quickly switch over to the Vertex Paint mode. Press T for opening up the tool shelf. But you can see the madcap overlay is still active. And to see what we are doing while vertex painting, we have to switch the shading from material or render it back to single color. Now everything is in white. And the cool thing is, for Blender 2.8, the Vertex Paint mode is updated. The great thing is, the updated Vertex Paint mode you can also use with Blender 2.79, but you have to download the latest build of Blender 2.79, not the official one. You have to go to the experimental builds I just showed you at the beginning of this video, and there download the latest build of Blender 2.79. And there this updated version of the Vertex Paint mode is included. And by the way, to see the Vertex Paint, we also have to enable this show overlays. So now we can paint on the creature here. So let's just pick a color. And the major change they did for the Vertex Paint mode is how the brush behaves on the surface. Because as far as I know now, it detects the normals and stuff like this. So if I'm painting here on the edge, it will project it from this side here. You can see now, if I look over here, we still have a full brush. In older versions of Blender, it was just a projection paint, as far as I know. So if I paint over this ear, then also color was added to the head here. And then we had this very sharp edges over here. So it looks super terrible, similar like this here. So I guess this is dependent on the angle we are using here, but it works much better. The only problem I had here was the performance. Since the sculpting here is pretty high resolution, it was really slow to draw on this, as you can see. But anyway, I just wanted to add a little bit of shading. So what you can do at first is to choose a color you like, and then down here go to Paint and click on Set Vertex Color, or just press Shift K. Then the whole creature will be colored in this color you have picked up here. By the way, if the grid is disturbing you, just go to Overlay and disable the grid, and then it's not in the way anymore. Then the next thing is we just pick another color, whatever you like. And the cool thing is we can also enable symmetry. That means if I paint here, it will be mirrored on the other side. And this certainly makes the painting process much easier. So I just added basic colors, then I switched it to a more pinkish tone for below here. Then I added white color to the eyes. I colored also the iris and pupil. Then the T's in white, but I did it just really rough, so I just wanted to do it really quick. And then we have a few brushes here. The standard draw brush is certainly for just drawing the color as we did it right now. But then we also have the blur brush and this average brush, which is like smearing this around. And I use this a lot to mix the different colors I painted on the surface. But yeah, let's take a quick look on the final result. There I show you some more things I did. So this is my final color painting. As you can see, pretty rough. So you can see all the strokes here, but I just wanted to have a very basic color for this creature. As mentioned, this was just a quick test for Blender 2.8, and I don't want to have a perfect result here. So also, if you look at the teeth, I did it pretty rough and not everything is colored right, but yeah. And I also created some other maps inside the Vertex Paint mode. If you go over here to Object Data, you find the Vertex Color panel. And here we have the standard col. This is the standard Vertex Paint, which will be added as soon as you paint something on the surface. But by pressing the plus button, you can also add multiple colors. So the next thing is a kind of ambient occlusion layer I did. And this is created automatically. So what I did was to change the color to white, then paint it in white completely, set the vertex color, and then down here you find also dirty vertex color. So if you press on that, you can see it will generate this map automatically. And this we can use later on in the materials to add this dark shadows and stuff like this to our color we have created up here. The next thing was a map for subsurface scattering, basically a black and white map. So every area which is black later on, there we will have subsurface scattering, that the light is shining through the surface a bit. And on the white areas, there we don't have this that strong. And the last thing, I needed a mask for the eyes. So the whole body is just white and the eyes are black. So I could adjust the material later on that I can exclude them from certain things like the bump map and stuff like this. So this was pretty helpful. So I created this 4 maps, which I used then for the material. So one little side note up here, you can see we have this tabs up here. And the second tab I created for the material, I just adjusted this. But if I do some changes over here for the node editor, for example, and then switch over to general, you can see you have this different screen layouts basically in this tabs. So you can create a new one, choose whatever you like. And also, if you double click on that, you can give it your own name. And then you easily can switch between different workspaces. Pretty cool. So, and then I wanted to create some materials and showcases in Blender EEVEE, the real-time render engine for the viewport. This here is what my final scene looks like. Pretty boring, right? By the way, a free download link to this scene file here is in the video description below. So feel free to download this and play around with this. So I wanted to render this in EEVEE. So what I did, I switched the clay render here to the EEVEE engine and down here the shading to render it. So, and every time I opened up the file again, you can see I can't see the textures. So I just had to do a little change here in the materials and then it will update the whole thing. Yeah, and this is how my scene looks like. I have my creature here. I have a simple ground with some reflections and some lights and volumetric effects. Now, first of all, let's take a look on the materials. So what we also can do is to disable the overlays to see it even better. This is my material setup, relatively simple as you can see. Now let's check what I did here. First of all, if you want to have access to the vertex painting we just did, press Shift A, go to Input, Attribute, and then just type in the vertex color information we want to have, like the col here, to have the color information. So I just added a emission shader to quickly test my material. So as you can see, this is now the color map. Let's check ambient occlusion. That's it. And then we have the other maps as well. So this is how I added the vertex color here. You can see I have all this vertex color in my material. And now let's start with the base color input. So I use the principal shader, which is added automatically if you create a new material inside Blender 2.8. And certainly I added my color. So let's quickly do it here. So then I have the ambient occlusion, vertex color over here. Then I put the ambient occlusion into a color ramp to adjust this a bit. You can see I basically made it a bit brighter, so I have more white areas and just the creases are colored in black. And then with a multiply node, you can find under color, mix RGB. I mixed those two together and then I had this result here. So then I added another color, but to understand this, we have to take a look on the bump map I did here. So first of all, I added a texture coordinate node, and then I added a Voronoi texture and a noise texture because I wanted to have this bump map on the surface that it looks like he has skin or scales all over the body. And this is a very simple trick we can use. So as you can see, I use the object output from the texture coordinates to make sure that these two textures are projected evenly over the surface. So let's take a look how this looks like. So this is the Voronoi texture, as you can see. I just increased the scale a bit. And this is a noise texture. Somehow we can't see it right here. Anyway, with the color ramp, I adjusted the Voronoi texture a bit. And then I mixed those two together. So if we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see we have a little bit of noise in here, and that's created by the noise texture. Then for the bump map, I added another mix node to exclude the eyes. So basically I used the attribute eyes for the eyes vertex color map I created and used this as mix factor, and here I mix the color we just have for the bump map with the black color here. And this I put as height value into a bump node, lower the strength, and this I put into the normal input. And then, as you can see, we have this kind of skin bump map, which looks pretty nice, in my opinion, for this very simple setup. So, and then I used this bump texture we have here and basically mixed this with our base color and this purple color. And then we had this result here so that all the skin is colored a little bit in purple. So we have more details on the surface. Then I plug this into the base color and into the subsurface scattering color so that the subsurface scattering also has a little bit of the standard skin color. Then I used the bump map stuff basically also as input for the roughness. So I have different roughness all over the body, so it's not reflecting everywhere with the same strength. I increased the specularity a bit. And the last thing what I did, I added the subsurface scattering map, put it into a color ramp to adjust this a bit and used this as subsurface input. That means I control the strength of the subsurface scattering with the black and white map. So in the areas around the head it's stronger and in other areas it's not that strong. And with the radius here you can control how much red, green and blue light should pass through the surface. So I lowered these values because I don't want to have this effect that strong. So, and in order to see all the effects, you have to go to the options of your material and then you have to enable screen space subsurface scattering. And in the render panel, you also have to enable all that stuff here, like subsurface scattering, screen space reflections, ambient occlusion, the bloom effect for this nice glowing effects, and the volumetric if you want to have the volumetric effect. I show you in a second how this works. But yeah, let's show it again. This is basically the material I set up. It's not perfect, it was just created pretty fast, so I'm sure you can optimize this in many ways. But yeah, for this purpose, to quickly create this material, it was more than enough. So for the ground, it's even simpler. I just used a noise texture with two different colors as base color. I added some roughness and specularity, and then with another noise texture and a bump node, I added this noise to the ground. And then we have this nice reflection on the ground here with some bumps. So now let's take a look at the scene setup. Let's enable overlays. Here you can see the lamps. So these are basically 3 area lamps I added here from different angles and different strengths. So if you select one, you can adjust everything over here in the object data panel. And I added a big cube, as you can see. There I added another material with the volume scatter shader, which is plugged into the volume input of the material output node. And then lower the density quite a lot, change the color and increase the anisotropy. As you can see, this is controlling how much the light is spread, basically. And yeah, this easy, I could adjust the scene. And to tint the scene, what I did was I go to the scene setup. First of all, I enabled the filmic blender, so I switch from default to filmic, increase the exposure a bit, then I enabled the curves here. And for the blue channel, I added a little bit more blue to the dark areas, and I lowered the blue value for the bright areas. And then you have this nice blue tinted effect. Yeah, and then disable overlay, press Alt F11 to disable the Windows border, and then press Alt F10 to go in the full screen mode without any menus, and then press position 1 to fit the camera perspective to the window size, and then with Shift F you can enable the walk navigation. Now we can look at this from all different angles. So if you want to know how to create a rendered video out of this, check my other video about Blender EEVEE, link in the video description. And now look at this. It's so beautiful to just look at the real-time graphics here. So somehow the depth of field does not work for me in this build, so I couldn't add depth of field here, which probably had make this even more beautiful. And this whole workflow, this whole creature from A to Z, I could create in only 2 hours with Blender 2.8. So I'm really excited when Blender 2.8 finally has a first stable release so that we can use it without that many crashes. But yeah, even with the restrictions I had, you can see I could create something pretty decent in a very short amount of time. Yeah, don't forget to download this file if you want to play around with this. Link in the video description. Certainly you have to open this with Blender 2.8. Yeah guys, as you can see, you can sculpt a creature in only 1 hour with 2 brushes and Blender 2.8. And now I'm challenging you guys to do the same. So create a creature in Blender in only 1 hour with the 2 sculpting brushes I used, the standard Sculpt Draw brush and the smooth brush. But you don't need to use Blender 2.8 because I know it will not run on every computer. You can use whatever Blender version you like. And then when you're done with your sculpting, make a screenshot. You don't need to render this or add materials and stuff like this. It's not required. And then post your screenshot somewhere online on social media like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and so on, and add the hashtag #ZagsSculptChallenge. Make sure that this posting is public and then add a link to this image in the comment section of this video. You have 1 week from now, the deadline is also in the video description below, and then I will pick one random winner from all the people that submitted their work. And the winner will get 1 free download copy of my Mastering Sculpting video training for Blender. If you have this training already or if you are not interested in this, feel free to join anyway. Just let me know in the comment that you're not participating in this challenge, because I guess this is a lot of fun. So after this challenge is over, I will announce the winner in the pinned comment under this video. So, and I especially challenge Julian Kaspar, Janal Sosak and Lukas Walser to join this challenge. Just write them a message or whatever if they are not watching this video. Yeah guys, don't forget to download my free sculpting cheat sheet, link in the description. Yeah, and if you don't want to join this challenge, you can always purchase my Mastering Sculpting workshop if you want to get into sculpting in Blender or put your sculpting skills to the next level. The link you find in the video description. Yeah guys, thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye! The video is over already. Goodbye.